What is going on? It is Nate the Game Guy coming back with another video at hand, and today I want to talk to you guys about my collecting goals going in to 2025. Now let's face it, 2024 is literally about to end. So I think right now is the perfect time to talk about some of my collecting goals going into the new year. I've really thought about some of these things that I really want to accomplish going into the new year, so I really feel like sharing them with you guys. So of course, if you guys also happen to have any collecting goals going into 2025 as well, comment them down below. I would love to hear what you guys have to say going on to the new year. I really want to hit things strong and really pack a punch when it comes to putting in some changes, putting in some work, and of course making things even better with the game room and the channel. So without further ado, let's dive right into this video subject. Take a look at some of my collecting goals going on straight up ahead into the new year right after the intro. Alright, so the first matter at hand that I want to talk to you guys about with some of my collecting goals going into the new year is trying to beef up my handheld collection. Now, I've talked about multiple times over the span of my channel that at some point I really want to beef up my handheld collection. I feel like my Nintendo DS collection is at a pretty good start. I have about over 130 some games for the Nintendo DS. I'm about 30 to 40, if I remember correctly, with the GBA collection. I've got a pretty solid PSP collection, and I do feel with the 3DS collection that I could use some work with there as well. But I will say one thing, that I do feel that over the years, as me being a game collector, I have neglected collecting for handheld game consoles. So I really want to be able to do is go through some games that I'm going to try to pick up for some of these handheld consoles, such as The Legend of Zelda Link in the Minish Cap for the Game Boy Advance, some of the old school Pokemon games, along with Super Mario Land as well, along with many other great titles that are on handheld consoles. Overall, I feel that I've spent a lot of time on consoles, just normal home consoles rather than handhelds. So I do want to do a bit of a 180 going into 2025. I will still collect for home consoles, obviously, but I do want to pay a little bit of some more attention when it comes to some handheld gaming consoles. Alright, so you guys have already seen my Sega Dreamcast collection, so I'm sure it comes as no surprise for those that have been following the channel for a little bit that one of my goals going into 2025 is to finish the North American Sega Dreamcast set. The Sega Dreamcast is easily one of my favorite game consoles of all time, so it is simply a must for me that I try to finish the set where I owned the entire US or North American library for the Dreamcast. Of course, once I get the Dreamcast taken care of, whether it will be in 2025 or later down the line, but of course I will be going for that 2025 mark, I am debating if I should go for a complete 32X set next, or should I go for a complete Nintendo 64 set? The Nintendo 64 is also another game console that I consider to be one of my personal favorites of all time, and the 32X has a pretty small library in general, just only 36 games made for the console, but I do think there are some games on there that look pretty fun. What do you guys think? Should I go for 64 first, or should I go for 32X first? Feel free to comment in the comment section down below. I would love to get some feedback and recommendations from you guys. Those are two consoles that I do plan to complete eventually in the future, but of course I will be paying attention to some of those comments to see which one I should start first. But yes, going into 2025, I've got to finish the Sega Dreamcast set. It is just simply a must that I do so. Now, another goal that I have to simply give a good attempt for going into the new year is trying to beef up those early 90s game console collections. I'm talking about Super Nintendo, Genesis, all that good stuff, right? With my Super Nintendo collection, I don't have all of my games right here on my shelf, but currently I have about 50 Super Nintendo games, and with the Sega Genesis, I have 43 games for the Genesis. These are two consoles that I really do enjoy, and I feel like that era of gaming I have neglected quite a bit in the collection, so I gotta fix that going into the new year. There are so many great games for the Super Nintendo and for the Genesis that I really want to get. After all, I want to get Sonic the Hedgehog 3, I want to get the Shinobi games, Chameleon Kid, Rice Star. Going to the Super Nintendo, there are the Mega Man X games, there's Chrono Trigger, Earthbound. A lot of those games are pretty expensive, but I can certainly give a good shot in trying to fulfill some of those goals going into the new year. After all, these consoles are known to be classic game consoles for great reason. So many great memories were put onto these consoles, especially for those that grew up within the 90s. And of course, these consoles came with some really solid libraries as well. After all, the Genesis introduced one of the most popular game characters of all time, which is Sonic the Hedgehog, and is also my personal favorite game character of all time. So it is only right that I try to get all the rest of the Sonic games for the Genesis. I've got Sonic Spinball and Sonic 2 and of course the original Sonic, but I gotta get Sonic and Knuckles, Sonic 3, Sonic 3D Blast, and Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine. It is just simply a must that I try to do so. So many great games on these classic early 90s game consoles. I definitely have to fix that going into the new year, because after all, as I've mentioned from before, so many great games on those consoles. Now, I've already mentioned at the beginning of this video that one of my goals going into the new year was trying to beef up my handheld collection. So, I'm sure it will come as no surprise to a lot of you guys as well that I'm also going to try to acquire some decent handheld consoles as well. I feel like I'm off to a good start already. I've got a Nintendo DS, a few variants of them actually. I've got a PSP, a 3DS, a PS Vita, an N-Gage, and a Game Boy Advance. So I'm off to a good start already, but I do want to get an original Game Boy, a Game Boy Color, a Sega Game Gear, and maybe a Sega Nomad as well. Unfortunately, when it comes to the Sega Game Gear, I think that is going to be the one that will probably give me the most trouble trying to get. I'm sure, of course, I could easily get one on eBay that's already got some of the issues fixed, but sadly with the Game Gear, the capacitors are going out on them, on so many of them. These are a handheld that essentially came out within the early 90s, and there are capacitors inside that power up the screen and also the sound. Unfortunately, when those two decide to go out, you're not really going to be able to get much playtime out of them. I bought a Game Gear just a couple years ago, and unfortunately it was just dead kaput. It just was not good anymore. I'm sure I could have easily paid to get them replaced, the capacitors replaced, but after doing a little bit of some shopping around to see how much it would be to get the capacitors replaced, because I am just trash at soldering, it would literally be the same price as just buying one with new capacitors on eBay than it would have been just to get it replaced or fixed at a local game store. But of course, as mentioned from before, I gotta get a Game Gear into my collection. I feel like the Game Gear is a pretty fun handheld. I've played one before. I just don't own one here in the collection, which is unfortunate, but I got to change that going into 2025. Also got to get that OG Game Boy and that Game Boy Color as well. So many great games on those, all of which I've played. Not the whole library, of course, but a few great games on those handhelds. So got to fix that as well going into 2025, because all three of those consoles are great. Of course, I'm not mentioning too much with the Sega Nomad, because that's literally just a portable Genesis. But the three that I gotta get, OG Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Gear. Three great consoles, handhelds that I gotta get very soon. Hey guys, thank you so much for checking out my video. Please be sure to check out these videos here, and here. After all, I post a lot of content when it comes to game collecting tips, and other video game related subjects. So be sure to keep an eye out every Monday and Friday where I upload consistently, and I'll be seeing you guys next time.